Okay, well, I'll start slow here as we allow other people to join, but welcome and thank you for being here. I am really excited to be here at Texas CSTA Convention, especially seeing that the theme of the convention is building equitable and inclusive CS programs this year. And that's because the heart and core of my presentation today is built from my passion to serve our linguistically diverse students. So to get started, we are going to be using the chat feature through a couple places in the presentation. So why don't we practice now? Just go ahead and click over into the chat and tell me where you are at. I'm assuming in Texas today. I am actually based in Indianapolis, but very happy to be here. Chicago, that's so close. Welcome, Jody. So in addition to the chat feature, if we get a couple more people joining us, we're also going to be utilizing the Poll Everywhere website to assist with some virtual interaction. You don't need an account to participate. You can just open a new tab in your web browser, or you can text via mobile phone. But if we don't get too many more participants, then we can just chat in the chat box. So for the first 15 minutes or so today, we'll learn a bit about each other and WIDA. Next, we'll spend about 20 minutes working through the Doing and Talking STEM takeaways. And finally, I'll point you towards resources that can help you learn more about teacher and student moves. And finally, we'll leave some time for a Q&A session. So a little bit about who we are. Codelicious provides full-year computer science curriculum for grades K through 12. Codelicious courses support grade-level differentiated learning pathways. And by bringing Codelicious computer science curriculum into the classroom, teachers provide their students with opportunities to learn skills in collaboration, critical thinking, and problem solving. So my name is Stephanie Bennett, and I taught middle and high school ESL and French for 11 years. Currently, I am a curriculum development specialist on the Codelicious team. And recently, I was given the opportunity at Codelicious to consider the entry points to computer science that our curriculum provides for diverse learners, specifically English language learners. This has been a dream come true opportunity for me, as it allows me to continue to advocate for the needs of this group of students who I am very passionate about. So now that you know a little bit about us, let's learn a little bit about you. So since we're such a small group today, we'll just do this in the chat. Let's go question by question. Do you currently teach STEM? Go ahead and answer in the chat there. Welcome, Jody. Welcome, Ira. Oh, I get the COVID teaching difficulties. I just can't imagine. I'm so proud of all my educator friends and former colleagues who are continuing to teach through COVID. So Ira, this question is probably mostly for you since you're our teacher here. Do you currently teach ELLs, also known as multilingual learners? So our next question here, if you want to drop a word in the chat, how comfortable are you in your ability to meet the needs of your ELLs? Oh, wow, such experience, amazing. But since you're in California, Ira, I bet you are not very familiar with WIDA, but for any other participants who would like to chime in, we're just answering some questions in the chat right now. How familiar are you with WIDA is our next question. Nice, a little bit of knowledge about WIDA, that's awesome. So I used WIDA almost all of my 11 years of ELL teaching. All right, so since we've got those questions answered, I'm just going to skip through these slides. With a bigger group, those help. So today we'll be discussing, Today we'll be discussing how you can meet the computer science learning and language needs of your multilingual learners. And as a side note, multilingual learners is slowly replacing English language learners in the educational community vernacular to recognize the real lived experiences of students who must negotiate 2 or more languages as they develop as students and community members. So today we'll take a deep dive into the WIDA Doing and Talking STEM workshop, and we'll discuss the benefits of implementing the teacher moves and student moves found therein. And by the end of our session today, you'll be able to articulate a big ask for a lesson of your choosing. You will be able to generate sentence starters as teacher moves and student moves, and you will be able to plan leveled accommodations for your students. So I know that Texas is not a WIDA member state, so let's learn a little bit more about the organization for those of you who aren't familiar. WIDA stands for World-Class Instructional Design and Assessment, and it is housed within the Wisconsin Center for Education Research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. They provide English language learner assessments, research-based tools and resources, and support to schools and families in 40 different US states, some territories, and some federal agencies. To help you envision the Texas agency equivalent, I did a little bit of research. I believe it's probably much like the Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System. To give you a bit more information, here are some of the basic services that WIDA provides member states. WIDA provides entrance exams and annual testing. Students are tested in all 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And WIDA provides descriptions of what students can do at each of these levels in their performance definitions. So I think the TELPUS also provides some descriptions, and we'll talk about those a little later. So WIDA really helps us to communicate in a shared vocabulary. Using the tools WIDA provides, we can more easily discuss what works to advance English language learners in computer science. So for example, conversational language versus academic language, or what does a level 1 student look like, or what accommodations are developmentally appropriate for level 4 students. So if you are interested, you can find out more about WIDA on their website, and I've just posted that in the chat for you. So today we're going to get started with a big ask. So we'll be back in the chat box here. In the chat box, please take a moment to answer the first question. Just think for a minute about how ideas and answers may be different. As educators, I think we probably have a lot of opinions on ideas and answers. So how are they different, ideas and answers? Thanks, Ira. I like that idea. Ideas are no correct answers. I definitely appreciate that. Second here, let's consider this question. Looking at national or state standards for your content area, are ideas or answers more important? Go ahead and think on that one for a second also. So as far as my answers to these questions go, to me, answers are more rigid. They oftentimes don't allow for debate or different points of view, whereas ideas are more flexible. They allow for ownership by the creator. And then as far as the standards question, are ideas or answers more important in standards? Well, I actually went and pulled some national standards. So for example, a Common Core grade 2 math standard is the number 100 can be thought of as a bundle of 10 tens. And that's definitely an idea, right? We can ask kids to spout out math facts as answers, but that idea that 100 is 10 tens will educationally propel them way faster towards their goals than just rote memory answers to math questions. So there in the Common Core grade 2 math, we can see that ideas are more important. Then in the NGSS science and engineering practices, the products of science are explanations and the products of engineering are solutions. Again, explanations and solutions more closely related to ideas than to answers. And then in our CSTA standards, grades 3 through 5, one of them is to discuss real world cybersecurity problems and how personal information can be protected. Again, very centered on ideas, and answers not so much. So from our Doing and Talking STEM workshop, there were 4 goals that were the main takeaways. Students should be attempting explanations, justifying their positions, questioning and challenging one another's ideas, and building new understanding together. These goals are really our new path forward in addressing the questions: who is doing the work in my classroom? Who has permission to speak in my classroom? These goals listed here are heavy lifting for any student, so you might be asking yourself, how in the world are my multilingual learners going to participate? So what WIDA Doing and Talking STEM provides for us, and what we are really looking at today, is a 3-tiered approach to lesson design and accommodations. So first, creating a big ask. Second, implementing teacher and student moves. And third, leveling accommodations. But know that while these goals may seem like an overwhelming challenge to multilingual learners, we are actually doing 2 things here. First, we are manufacturing situations where all students are encouraged to to use lots of academic language and build academic ideas. And second, via that setup, we are naturally keeping our learning expectations high for all students. And ultimately, I think those are great goals and ones shared by all teachers. So there are many ways teachers can connect multilingual learners to the content and curriculum of their subject matter. And we'll discuss 3 interconnected ideas today. So first, like I mentioned, crafting your big ask. We'll envisage how you can flip the standard teaching learning lesson paradigm. Second, discussion prompts. How can we coach and guide students towards ideas without providing answers? Third, leveled accommodations. We'll tackle a strategy for thinking through how you can meet your multilingual learners at their level. So to get started, consider a lesson you have coming up in the next few weeks of the semester. Select a lesson with a specific learning goal or theme that may have many correct answers or ways of thinking about the topic. Make sure it's a topic you are familiar with. Maybe you've taught it several times in years past, and maybe it's one you felt is interesting and intriguing in concept, but perhaps has fallen flat with students, either in that it was difficult academically or their enthusiasm just didn't match up to your expectations. So as you're choosing your lesson, again, keep these goals in mind. These are the goals of our lesson design. So selecting a lesson with a specific learning goal or theme that may have many correct answers or ways of thinking about the topic is ideal. So in the big ask we started our session with today, we came to the conclusion that ideas are more important than answers. This is backed up in national and state standards in multiple different subject areas and is woven into the Common Core. We want students crafting ideas and supporting their ideas with evidence from a wide range of sources. In the WIDA Doing and Talking STEM workshop, it was suggested that we get students attempting explanations, justifying their positions, questioning and challenging one another's ideas, and building new understanding together. So thinking about the main learning objective or theme of the lesson you've chosen to work on today, reflect for a minute on how students could talk through a challenging or new idea or theme. Several examples were provided in the workshop. And my personal favorite was when small groups of students were provided with a 3D model. So it looked like a clear plastic cup with a straw stuck into the bottom of the plastic cup. And the end of the straw that was contained inside of the cup had a small balloon taped on it. That sat inside of the cup, while the rim of the cup was covered with a piece of flat, stretchy rubber, probably a balloon that had gotten cut up and taped around the outside rim of the cup. So students were asked what body system that model might represent. And students were challenged to come up with specific evidence to back up their choice of body system. And their conversations were delightful to listen to. They were fully engaged in the task at hand, providing evidence of how the model represented the respiratory system. And at times, they were completely off base in the ideas they generated. But again, our standards ask students to form and evaluate ideas. And this was more important in the lesson than a strictly right or wrong answer, because academic language was faithfully being used by the students. In computer science, we could consider providing students with manipulatives, models, circuits, computer parts, and even plain old printed images to get them engaged in their thinking and conversation. Really, this is about flipping the teaching and learning paradigm on its head. What can students discover and evaluate together in lieu of, or at least before, a teacher's explanation or lecture? So let's turn back to that upcoming lesson that you've chosen. Consider the main learning objective or theme of your lesson. Using only their prior knowledge and experiences, how could students come to new conclusions? How could cooperative discussion lead students to form and evaluate ideas? If you don't know where to start with your specific topic, teachers featured in the workshop suggested searching the internet for lessons with the key term meaning making attached to the learning topic. For example, just Google meaning making activities for 7th grade algebra. Activities should have more than one right answer, and students should be able to spend time analyzing strategies, ideas, or methods to explain why some ideas are better than others. So the second teacher move is supporting students via discussion. The WIDA workshop provided a diagram of teacher moves to help teachers support students in academic discussion. In these student discussion-focused lessons, we don't want to give away the answers or take the job of thinking and productive struggle away from students. Instead, we want to support students' exploration of their own ideas and support their language use and acquisition. As we check in on groups as the work, we want to listen to students and model descriptive and specific language use. So in our computer science courses, if we've asked students to explain how they've used a conditional statement in their code, we might ask them to describe it orally, but we might also ask them to draw a diagram or a flowchart of the code in order to follow their decision making. Or as a group of students are working through designing a model of how the internet works, we might emphasize a particular piece of their thinking that is notable for its insight. So you might say, oh, I see you've broken up the image into smaller pieces. Why is that important in your model? So let's turn back to your lesson now. You know the lesson objective. You've crafted a big ask for students to consider before any lecture or teaching has gone on. The big ask has multiple entry points, may have multiple correct solutions, and is ripe for discussion and debate. Now consider what's listed on your screen. How can you prepare to support students during their discussions? We can anticipate student ideas and roadblocks, prepare to help students clarify their ideas and deepen their reasoning, and build your repertoire of probing questions and verbal scaffolds. So our third and last teacher move is to consider how we can provide specific supports to our multilingual learners as they participate in the discussion-centered lesson. The goal is always to lighten the linguistic load for our multilingual learners while maintaining the rigor inherent in our content. So we need to understand the WIDA performance definitions. I think these are pretty equivalent to the TELPUS proficiency level descriptors, if my research led me in the right direction. What the WIDA performance definitions or the TELPUS proficiency level descriptors do is they do a beautiful job of describing multilingual learners at each stage of their language acquisition journey. WIDA breaks down productive, meaning speaking and writing skills, and receptive, listening and reading skills, and then gives very detailed descriptions of what students can do in each of those categories. So what we're going to look at today is actually a very simplified and short summary of the WIDA performance definitions. If you would like to see the performance definitions from WIDA, you can find those in this link. I'm going to post in the chat here. It's a pretty hefty document, but you can find those on pages 10 and 11. So let me pull up this very simplified version. From my research into TELPUS, I think these levels pretty much align with the beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high descriptors. So our level 1 students are just using words and phrases. Level 2 students are putting together simple sentences using very repetitive grammatical structures and are starting to get some general content academic language. Whereas level 3 students, level 4 students are moving into very much more organized ideas, specific content language, and those level 4 students are even starting to grasp some of those idioms that we love so much in English. So to envision these linguistic scaffolds, remember we want to lighten the linguistic load of our classroom activities while maintaining access to rigorous content. Draw yourself a chart like this one, and in the very top box, you should list your learning objective or your classroom activity. But you could also use this space to add in content standards, ESL standards, or language objectives. So next, we're going to write our students' names by level. This really helps you consider individual student strengths and then helps you anticipate where a student might need a helping hand. You could also use these categories as you assign students to work groups. It is encouraged that you create heterogeneous groups as frequently as possible so that less fluent learners can listen to and absorb the language of more fluent learners. But maybe you also consider that for certain activities, all of your level 1 students may feel more comfortable contributing in a group together. So let's take a look at some of these suggestions. These are just really general. We'll add in some specific scaffolds and supports for students to help them engage in our content and practice using academic language. So this is where I always refer back to my SIOP book. SIOP is the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, which was born at the Center for Applied Linguistics, and they offer great resources for teachers working with multilingual learners. And I'll post their website in the chat also. So here are just a few. There's that link for you. Here are just a few examples of supports I might offer to my students by level. This is again, by no means an exhaustive list, but you can see how students are supported at their specific language level. So for example, our level 1 students, who remember are at that word phrase level of English acquisition, are provided with L1 supports. So we're giving them a translated question and then asking them to complete sentences using a word bank. And these students could then, with the help of the teacher, read their sentences to the group by repeating the pronunciation after the teacher. But on the other end of our spectrum, at the level 4 level, remember this is a student at the discourse level using a variety of sentence structures, a student who's learning technical content area language. We're going to challenge them to use that type of vocabulary in the group discussion specifically. So those are 3 teacher moves. As we pivot to think about student moves next, I want you to keep these 2 questions at the front of your mind. Who is doing the work in your classroom and who has permission to speak? We'll revisit our goals one last time, just to keep them front of mind while we talk about how we can support student engagement and self-direction in group work. From looking at these goals, it is obvious that we want our students to be doing the mental work in our classrooms, and we want every student to contribute. So as we shift our classroom time towards discussion and collaboration, what should students be doing to be successful? Student moves will probably not come naturally to all students. A solid classroom community must be established, which promotes shared responsibility for learning and meaning making. Ideas and clear communication become more important than answers. I think this is one of those things that you can't skip teaching. The more preparation you put into establishing community and routinely implementing these routines, the more efficiently your class will operate. As we are all pressed to teach bell to bell, it may seem like it takes away too much learning time, but consider the trade-offs and the time savings in fewer behavioral disruptions and repetition of procedures. So once community and a safe learning space, safe meaning safe to make mistakes, safe to try new things, are established, how do we keep our academic language and meaning making in front of our students' minds? The WIDA Doing and Talking STEM workshop suggested several categories of sentence starters, which can be taught to and used by students. So let's brainstorm some examples together. I'm going to put a question up here. Let's move over to the chat once again. And will you please consider the first category listed on your screen, restating or summarizing ideas. What sentence starters or prompts could routinely be used to help students listen to each other's ideas and communicate? So I have a few ideas here. I'll put them in the chat again. If I want to help my students restate or summarize an idea, I'm going to give them some sentence starters like, in other words, I think what he's saying is, or are you saying that? Let's think about another group of sentence starters we might ask students to employ. If we want students supporting an idea, what are some sentence starters that could be helpful to students? If you think of some, put them in the chat over there. Sorry, my computer's getting out of control. All right, so if we want to help students support an idea, we might give them sentence starters like, that might work well because, or remember, we read that, or yesterday we also learned that. Okay. These are going to be very helpful for your English language learners. So of moves should be living documents, providing students with an opportunity to buy into the idea of these student moves, these sentence starters to help them communicate is really important. So to help them buy into the process and the idea of sentence starters, allow them to add their own sentence starters or prompts throughout the school year. Also notice and congratulate students as you hear them implementing the student moves, and soon it'll become part of your classroom culture. So now that we've learned how to craft a big ask, how to incorporate teacher and student moves into your classroom routine, and we've discussed a way to craft leveled accommodations via the MPI, let's take a look at how Codelicious is implementing these ideas. We'll preview an unplugged lesson called How Computers Work. So let me pop over to this version of the document and zoom in a little bit here. So this is the format of all of our Codelicious lessons. We give teachers an overview page with an activity description, learning objectives, materials and resources, vocabulary for teachers and students, and some notes on getting prepared for the lesson. And then we walk teachers through it step by step. In this lesson, students are going to start with an activity called a think tank. So the goal of this lesson is for students to be able to recognize that all computers use input, store, process, output models, and for students to be able to identify, compare, and contrast input and output components on the devices that they use every day. So I asked myself, what could students discover on their own prior to me teaching them anything, using only their prior knowledge what could they do to get started in this with this idea of the input, store, process, output model. So that's where I came up with the idea of the think tank. So at the beginning of this activity, students participate in a think tank. And let me make this one a little bit bigger for you also. So students would receive this handout. And here we have our big ask questions. What do each set of items have in common? How do both sets of items work together? And here we have our student moves. This is what the vocabulary, those sentence starters that are going to help students begin to communicate, support each other. So students are going to get this set of pictures, and they're going to get this set of pictures, and then they'll have to discuss and answer these two questions and provide evidence for their thinking. So here we can easily identify the big ask. We saw the student moves, and students are going to work together in small groups to discuss these questions, come up with ideas, and provide evidence to back up their answers. So only then would we go back to the lesson, and after students have presented their ideas, talked about the pictures that they, and the items in the pictures that they were discussing. Read the two questions to us. Sure, Jody. Sorry, here. Yeah, they're here. What do each set of items have in common, and how do both sets of items work together were the two big ask questions. So only then, after students have had a chance to come up with their own ideas, would the teacher then play a video and get them rolling on a little bit of a lecture and discussion. So finally, one thing Codelicious offers is our ELL supplemental teaching guides. And so here we have the learning objectives from the lesson. And if you're familiar with SIOP and language objectives, we also have those listed here. And then it goes through the lesson step by step again, providing teachers with those leveled accommodations. These are based on the MPI type layout we saw earlier. And so I'll just show you an example here that I've highlighted. And let me know if you guys can't see this again. I'm sorry, Jody. So during that group work, level 1 student is going to practice repeating the pronunciation of the parts of the computer, because remember, they're at that word level. Whereas a level 2 student can practice the pronunciation of the sentence starters, and you can specifically ask those level 2 students to use 2 of those sentence starters in the discussion. Now, a level 3 student probably isn't going to need practice with pronunciation, but you could definitely ask them to specifically use 3 sentence starters in the discussion. So you can see here how we kind of build up those supports for our students. So if you would like to learn more about the WIDA workshop, I'm going to put some links in our chat here. Hopefully those come through and they work. No, I have too many characters. There's some links for you. Focus on those dark, bold links. Those are the ones that I think will provide you with more information that's most useful for teachers. And then let me get the rest of those. Let's see, teacher reflection questions. Sorry, that limit on the characters really threw me for a loop there. Now let's post in those. All right, there's the other 2. Great. So references, if you're interested, and then time for Q&A. So thank you all so much for being here. Definitely drop questions in the chat if you have them. If you are interested in future PD opportunities with Codelicious, definitely join our newsletter mailing list, and we will send those out to you. I'll put a link here in the chat. And finally, I will be presenting another PD this month, and that one is going to be on the 4 C's of 21st century skills. Those are communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. So if you are interested in that, let me post the time and date of that in the chat also. There we go. All right, Jody, is the WIDA workshop something that Codelicious participated in? So I was able to participate in the WIDA workshop, yes. Officially, Codelicious doesn't have any ties to WIDA. Just as a teacher, I was able to participate, and I enjoyed the session so much, I had to share the great information. So I put this professional development together. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.